Director Duffy?
Here.
Director Grajeda?
Here.
Director Hawkins?
Here.
Director Schooley?
Here.
Director Vasquez? Here. President Apodaca?
Here. Director Hawkins, would you please lead us in the invocation? And Director Schooley is the pledge of allegiance.
Please stand and bow your heads. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for all the blessings that you've bestowed on each and every one of us. Please watch over everyone in this room, that we would do the business of the day wise and we will be interested in making sure that we have the wisdom to do what is needed to do it here at Central Basin, as we have run into some real crisis here, and we need your guidance on the way out of this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please face the flag, put your right hand over your heart, and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You have certification, Madam Secretary? Public comments and
Yes, Mr. President, we have one request to speak. Gina Naylor, representing the Purveyors Ad Hoc Committee on Central Basin Budget and Finance.
Yes, good morning, directors. Thank you for allowing us to present our statement to you today. We've been working very hard on a long-term solution for Central Basin. And I'd like to read our statement. The water purveyors, in a good faith effort, formed the Central Basin Water District Retail Agency Ad Hoc Committee on Budget and Finance in January of 2018 to work with Mr. Kevin Hunt, General Manager, and staff on a solution to the district's fiscal challenges. The Ad Hoc Committee met 4 times over the course of a month for several hours each time. The water purveyors met with Mr. Hunt and staff as well as alone to discuss the challenges, listen to each other's perspectives and ideas, review detailed budget information provided by Central Basin staff, including revenues and expenditures, staff levels and functions, salaries and benefits, current services and programs, and recycled water systems, including capital operations and maintenance needs and related bond payments. We looked at realistic water sales projections, the role of Central Basin, and the overall sustainability of the district. Overall, what the water purveyors came to understand is that times have changed for us all following the recession and drought, and that we must take this time to reconsider a new way of sustaining the district's existence by focusing on services and programs that are essential to the delivery of water. These are lean years, not a time for expansion of services and programs. The purveyors do not support a new fixed meter charge or any other increased charge. The purveyors, after careful analysis of detailed budget information, suggested to Mr. Hunt the following recommendations. 1. A $1.3 million reduction in staff salary and benefit expenses to be determined by the General Manager and Board, which equates to a 1/3 reduction in staff salary and benefits. 2. Reconsideration of the General Manager's previously presented reductions, of which only 1/3 was approved. 3. The rate study should consider a combination of reductions and secured future revenue increases as an option to avoid a meter charge. 4. Utilizing reserves for 1 to 2 years, until which time the board can make a more informed decision regarding fee and rate increases needed. 5. Paying the penalty for a reduction of credit rating temporarily to allow adequate time to assess the district's true fiscal needs. 6. Contracting out certain services. 7. Grandfathering in the current level of board member benefits and offering a reduced benefits package to all incoming board members. The ad hoc committee believes that with the implementation of the above recommendations, no meter charge or any other increased charge to the purveyors will be necessary. The water purveyors invested considerable time as a good faith effort to work together on a long-term solution. We respectfully ask that the Central Basin Board consider our recommendations and make a good faith effort to refocus the district to provide essential services, programs, and staffing to supply water at the most reasonable cost that we can all justify to our customers. We are available here today to answer questions the board may have during the time that it is discussed on the agenda. Thank you for your time and consideration.
I generally thought this because of, it's a public comment, but do you plan on addressing their questions or statements during the workshop?
We are going to go over where we are in the budgeted rates. I can tell you on their recommendations, items 2, 3, 6, and 7, that will be definitely continuing to work on. So we'll explain why when we go through it.
That's a yes, you'll be addressing
Yes.
those. Okay. And then will we have the ability to ask them questions when we discuss that item?
Absolutely, they'll be open again.
Item 3, consideration by the Board of Directors to fill a vacancy creating Division 1 of the appointment or calling for an election.
Good morning, Directors. On March 8th, the board was notified that a vacancy was created in Division 1, and so the board has two options here as to either, one, consider appointing or calling for an election. If the board considers appointing someone to this position, there'll be representation in that seat at least for the next 8 months. But because the vacancy was created so early in the first part of the term, you will be required to go to an election. That's the next general election. It's 130 days before the elections. In this case, in November of 2018, there will be an election for that seat, at least to cover the remaining part of that term, which is 2 years. So the cost for that is about $240,000 after conversations that we had with the county, and you also have that estimated total before you. If the board chooses to call for an election, then the seat will remain vacant, unrepresented, and you still will be having that election in November of 2018. So it's for you to consider whether you want to appoint or consider calling for election. You have 60 days to do that from the date of vacancy. Should you choose not to fill that or not do anything with this, whether it's call for an election or appoint, it will go to the County Board of Supervisors for them to consider appointing or calling for an election. It should be noted, though, that expense, if the County Board of Supervisors called for an election, it's Central Basin's responsibility to cover. And so we do have a couple of slides here if you consider appointing. So in this case, as I've indicated, the vacancy was created on March 8th. You're having the meeting today to consider whether to appoint or whether to call for an election. There are some things that we as staff, if you appoint, have to do, which is, in this case, post the vacancy in several areas, at least 3 or more, 15 days prior to you making an appointment, as well as we notify the county of the vacancy, issue notices to the cities, to the legislators, as well as issue a press release for that vacancy. The next step for us would be March 23rd, in this case, would be the last day to notify the county.
I'm sorry, Maggie, could you go back to the
Yes,
previous
Director.
slide? So no matter what we do, Maggie, we still have to go to election.
Yes, sir. The only thing here is an appointment, you at least have representation in that seat for 8 months. If you don't appoint and you choose to go for election, there's no representation in that seat.
And there's a cost to that.
There is a cost to it.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Maggie.
So again, if you did consider going for appointment, at least for us, March 23rd is our last day to notify the county of that vacancy. During this time, though, if you consider appointing today, then we initiate the process of sending out the notices to all the cities and the legislators, asking for letters of interest, resumes, statements of qualifications, and we're suggesting extending that at least to April 6th to receive that, at which time we would prepare those packages of the interested candidates and submit them to the board for them to consider. We are suggesting April 13 as the day in which the board could get together, conduct the interviews of the candidates, as well as consider filling that seat by appointment on that date. If you so choose to follow that schedule, then April 28th, we have 15 days to notify the county that you've made an appointment, which is April 28th. May 7th is actually the last day, the 60-day ending period for appointing or choosing to call for an election. It should be noted, though, that for this seat, the regular full term ends in 2020, so you still would have to run. So it's only just to fill this 2-year gap, and then you'd run again in 2020. Any questions?
I heard one of the board members make, I'd like to take credit for this, but I can't. Is there an option to seek advice from the state regarding filling the position at all? Because the board's supposed to shrink anyway in 2020.
You'd have to revise we looked into that because we heard that was a suggestion made, and you'd have to revise the legislation. You'd have to put a piece of legislation in because the legislation was passed by the...
Okay.
Yeah, but...
I make a motion that we...
What is it? I have a couple of questions. What goes first? The motions go first?
I think we'll make the motion. It'd have to be a second anyway, Director.
Oh, okay.
My motion is that we leave the seat vacant and just move to when we have to elect and save as much money as we can and time and effort because that's what we're here to talk about today. So,
Pardon me, just point of clarification, there is no cost to the appointment process, is there?
For the appointment process, it's just the mailings that staff would handle, staff time.
Roughly how much is that?
I don't think it'll be more than 500, Director.
Okay, so the cost is not for the appointment, the cost is for the election, which is $200.
The election is $200.
And then you have to pay one way or another.
One way or another.
for the time and effort,
Time and
there's a
effort.
cost for the directors being on committees, there's a cost for all of that.
That would be a maximum of 20.
If you call for a special board meeting for the directors to conduct interviews, it's per diem for the directors.
Yeah, my questions were around SB 1734. I think these questions would probably be more appropriate for the attorney to respond, unless we have someone else that has, the expertise in this. My understanding is that we are required to reduce the board to 4, and maybe we can recess and take a look at the piece of legislation, but my understanding is that we can do that anytime before, 2022? 2020, right. So, and I would like the lawyer, who might be able to respond, or maybe we can have a legal opinion. I can request a legal opinion that can be drafted in conjunction with the Attorney General's office. But I think we can, in my opinion, we should look at all of the options that would save us $250,000 in election fees, which we would be required to pay by calling for a special election, and we would also it would bring us in compliance with AB 1794, which requires us to reduce the number of directors. So
My recollection of the statute is that it doesn't call for a restructuring in the size of the board before this election in November would take place.
well, no, that's not the question.
Does it preclude it? That's the question. Does it preclude it from occurring? In 2020, the board is shrunk to 7.
2022.
After the...
After
They have a census in 2020 that is used in 2021 to redistrict, and in 2022, we have an election with full
So then,
I'm sorry, so as part of that, the most important and crucial part of it is the redistricting, right?
Right.
Yes. Which cannot be achieved between now and November.
No, I'm going to get up time.
So, Treasurer Ciccone, do you have any comments?
No, I like to hear what everybody else has to say before I make my decision.
Director Hawkins?
I don't know why we're even considering something that's supposed to happen in 4 more years when we should be paying attention to what we're doing with the appointment today.
The other issue that is important to me is I don't think that we have the authority in here to preclude presentation. The role of government is representation. So I don't think that I have the authority, and in good conscience I wouldn't do that, to essentially take away representation of a segment of our population that we serve. That's my concern.
Gabby, do you have anything?
It sounds like we have some differences of opinion. If it would be possible, and I concur with Director Escudi, I think we should have full representation. But I think it would be possible to get a legal opinion as to what our options might be. And I don't know how quickly we could get that, because we have what sounds like a difference of opinion of whether we do the redistricting as soon as we can, if that's even possible. But I would like to see if we could do
The legislation here is that this bill would require the Board of Directors of the Central Basin Municipal Water District to be composed of 8 directors until the directors elected at the November 8, 2022 election take office, when the board will be composed of 7 directors. So the way I read that, it has to be 8 until that time.
That takes care of that question.
Well, if the issue is then the interest in this board to have representation, then I really think we should consider an appointment. If that is at the core of this issue, making sure that this district is properly represented by an elected official, I certainly think we should go ahead and proceed with the appointment so that there's no vacancy there.
Any other comments?
Okay, so you wanted to recommend
Also,
we can't do
under the
it. Is that what?
legislation,
Right.
that
So
is,
do we got that in writing?
there's 2 conversations
Yes.
going on there. I didn't mean that. What do we, Mr. Consul?
We have, yeah, I'm sorry.
My question was, okay, what Director Vasquez recommended, do we have that in writing that we can't do it?
Yeah, you just read it.
Right.
Okay, so we can.
We cannot do it. It must be 8 until 20.
Was that a motion by you?
We currently have a motion. Would that be a substitute motion? We have a motion by Director Grajeda to call for an election, is my understanding.
Yeah, Mike, to be clear, directors, you appoint for a few months and then you have to hold an election. Generally, you appoint to fill the position until it's done. Then you hold a regular election. In this particular case, we're not going to do that. We're going to hold a special election in a few months. I don't see why we need to do all that work with an appointment and eventually incur the extra cost.
You can't do that. You can't fill in the rest of the vacancy, the rest of the time for this vacancy, because the law doesn't allow you to do that.
Government Code 1780 indicates that the first full part of the term, in this case, the vacancy happened 130 days before the next general election. So in this case, there is enough time for them to conduct an election to fill that seat. Had it been in August when the director, if he would have submitted his resignation, then there wouldn't have been enough time, and in that case, he covers the remaining part of that term.
But we have the option of not appointing. We don't have to appoint. We can wait until we
You
have
call for an election, essentially. You would call for an election. In this case, if you do nothing, whether it's calling for an election or appointing, the decision goes to the County Board of Supervisors. In that case, the County Board of Supervisors has the option to appoint or call for an election.
I must have misread. It's my understanding that if we appoint, they hold the seat for how long?
That's that 8-month period. Nonetheless, they still have to run for the election to cover the remaining 2 years.
In 8 months.
In 8 months, yes.
But we can't leave the position empty, vacant. We can't leave the position vacant, because if we do, then the county steps in?
So what you have here is, one, the appointment process. So if you choose to appoint, then you fill the seat for those 8 months, but the seat itself is still up for election in November 2018. If you choose not to appoint, then the next option is to go for election. And when you go for an election, that seat remains vacant.
But my understanding is it doesn't stop there. If we choose not to appoint, it goes to the county, and the county can choose to appoint, and if the county appoints, then we just swear the person in. If they choose not to appoint, then they can call for a special election,
So
right?
in our conversation with the County Board of Supervisors, the option that you as a board has is to, one, appoint or call for an election.
Right. And if we don't do either.
If you don't do either, then in this case, the decision goes to the County Board of
But
Supervisors.
if we make a decision, then they just rubber stamp whatever we decide.
The county election division, if, for example, you tell me today that we're calling for an election and we're not appointing that seat, we as a district notify the county elections division that you're calling for an election. That seat will remain unfilled.
So in action, meaning if we do not take either or, then you're relinquishing your right to the County Board of Supervisors to make that decision on your behalf.
Correct.
Right, but you just validated what I was saying. We would take action then to not appoint, but to elect when it comes up in 8 months.
In 8 months, yes. We would note, essentially, today, you choose to call for an election, we notify the county, they have it in their records that they have to have that seat as part of the election
That
process.
would be my motion, is to not appoint, leave the position vacant for 8 months, and then call for an election, which we would have to do anyway.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll make a substitute motion to make an appointment to fill the position. I'm really concerned that this community is not going to be represented for 8 months, and from the discussion that I hear with my colleagues, it sounds like there's a big concern about there not being representation there. So I would like to make a substitute motion to move forward with an appointment.
I'll second that motion.
I have a second. Roll call, please.
Director Chacon?
Yes.
Director Gebney?
Abstain.
Director Grajeda?
No.
Director Hawkins?
Yes.
Director Osculi?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes?
President Apodaca?
Yes.
Motion passes to appoint. Thank you, directors.
Thank you. Item 4, authorization for sole source contract award to the Thielman, Rullup and Associates in the amount of $17,500 for financial advisory services for appropriations from the district reserve.
Good morning. This item was reviewed at the Finance Committee earlier this month in March. Prior Finance Committees, we have discussed in December the letter of credit expiring in June, and staff has been working diligently to communicate with them in multiple avenues, whether email, in person, or over the phone, to try to renew the letter of credit. However, we just received notice less than a week ago that the letter of credit has only been offered to be extended for a limited period of 6 months with the intent to terminate after that 6 months. So that's given us a little more urgency today. That's the reason for our recommendation to award the sole source contract. Just a little bit about Fieldman Roll-Up. They have a good market share, as is discussed in the proposal that they've submitted, and they have experience with Central Basin. They've been our financial advisor for some time and helped us most recently receive ratings from both Standard & Poor's and Fitch. In addition, they also helped us with our 2016 bond financing. So they have that unique experience, and with the urgency that I've just stated, that's our recommendation, is to award the sole source contract to Fieldman Roll-Up for financial advisory services. That concludes my presentation. I'd be willing to answer any questions.
Questions, anyone?
I have something. I thought you folks Andrew, you and the general manager were going to be meeting with the bankers on the letter of credit either in February or March.
We just did a week ago. Less than a week ago on Friday.
Okay.
And I've had informal meetings with them. I apologize. At the CSMFO conference that was conducted in February. Had two different conversations. We've had multiple phone calls.
What conference is that?
It's the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers.
Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead. What was your business? You met with them there?
Yes. We had two different conversations on 2 different days.
So you guys didn't really have a meeting with them. You met them at the conference and just talked with them there.
And we've had phone calls. We had a kickoff kind of phone call in January. We've had many phone calls with some of their credit analysis staff. And we finally had like a formal sit-down meeting less than a week ago.
Okay, there was a discussion about we had to take action on the fixed meter charge, so that when you met with them, you had this in your toolboxes to talk with them. What happened with all that?
Exactly.
I know we didn't get that to you to talk about, but
What happened with that is not having it was one of the reasons that you're telling us they're only going to extend it for 6 months. Other reason was the press in the paper, putting information out there about our declining water sales. So there's been pressure on us, as you know, for years in terms of, we'll go into that in the next presentation, but there's been pressure on us financially for years toward downgrades. This is the expected next step. They had told us last time when they renewed it, it was a shorter term. They renewed it for, was it 2 years instead of 3?
Correct.
So this has been coming for a while, and it's one of the reasons that we're hoping to go ahead and be able to refinance. We don't have a choice now. What we do, we can try and find another letter of credit, but that's the next discussion. Right now, what we want to do is get our financial advisor on board so we can work with them on the options that we have to respond to this.
so, is this for all the bonds or just the bonds that relate to the letter of credit?
2000.
We're willing to look at, this relates to specifically the 2008s. However, we've had some just kind of preliminary discussions. There may be opportunities to evaluate the 2010 bonds also. But for right now, we're going to focus our energy on the letter of credit, which is related to the 2008 bonds.
Okay, so letter of credit relates to 2008 bonds, that's what we're working on right now, and that's to do specifically what? To not have to incur the additional costs that we were told we may have to incur if there's a downgrade? By the letter of credit document or by somebody else?
So the next agenda item discusses this much more in detail. I'm happy to answer the question now, or if you prefer, I could discuss that in the next agenda item.
I'm happy to vote on this if you want to do it then, or do you want me to vote on it now? Because I'm trying to get from myself my answer for what we're doing here.
The easy way to put it is that we're bringing these people on board to analyze the options that we have. We have 4 options. 2 of them relate to keeping the variable debt, finding a new person to do it, or another mechanism, and 2 involve changing it to fixed debt, either superior or either above parity debt or subordinate debt. So there are 4 different options that they'll be looking at for us and recommending, and it ties in with the next item, which is the investment bank report. So,
what was discussed in the past was that a letter of credit would be downgraded that would cost us $150,000, and if something else happened, that would cost us another $100,000. What you're talking about is refinancing. Those are 2 different things, as I understand.
no, the letter of credit, we also told that they may not extend. What they did is it's what's called a courtesy extension. They gave us 6 months to let us know they're not renewing it again, so we have time to bid it in that. That's a message right there.
Do we need to be worried about being downgraded?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no rating involved with this yet. And we've tried to get them to fix the rate that they're charging us for this 6 months, so that if we do get a downgrade in the next month or 2, that it doesn't impact it for the 6 months. So, but the whole basis of the letter of credit is based on a certain credit rating, and that translates into an interest rate and actually the ability to do it.
So is this going to address that issue?
Yeah,
Yes.
The whole issue is what this does is if we are successful and refinance the bonds at a stable rate, it takes us out of worrying about the letter of credit on an almost daily basis like we've been for the last 3 years. It makes a move. We don't have the pressures on it to down, and we can financing in a different manner. We can use reserves more and things like that you cannot use now because you don't meet your debt coverage ratio.
So this item before us is you asking for authorization for sole source for Bethel.
We've done our work for years in the district.
17,500, and you just explain what sort of work or scope of work they are going to undertake.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
So I guess the question is, do we want to do this or not?
I have a question. How much is left in cash reserves if we agree to do this?
Bless you.
This is a 17,000 expenditure. We have over 10.1 million, I believe.
So it'd be 10.1 less something.
Less than 17, yeah, exactly.
Plus other considerations we talked about from the graders.
Yeah, but there's plenty of reserve.
Mr. Chair, if I may, if there are no other questions, I move to authorize for a sole source contract with Phil Unrolled as recommended by the staff.
I second it. Roll call, please.
Director Chuckland?
Kevin, is this something we need to do?
Yes, it is, sir.
Yes.
Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yeah.
Director Hawkins?
Yes.
Director Schooley?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes?
President Apodaca?
Yes. Thank you. Item 5, potential debt refund.
Now we have a little bit more chance to discuss the letter of credit and these potential options that Fieldman Roll-Up will be assisting the district in the financial advisory role. First, to give a little background on a little update rather on the agenda, we'll talk about the background, the urgency for this, why now, and some options moving forward. Just a little background on the 2008s. That variable rate debt issued in 2008, it did require that letter of credit. It's a variable rate debt issuance. We also synthetically fixed the interest rate to 3.3% via a separate transaction. It's called a swap transaction. And as you can probably guess, we've had this discussion briefly at the Finance Committee. This is a complex financial transaction. And just to give you a little background on the relationships and flows, this diagram tries to just show graphically some of those relationships. So if you start with at the top left at Central Basin and then go to the right, that in essence is the variable rate that we pay the bondholders. If you follow that one through the letter of credit provider, then to the bondholders, that is the variable interest rate debt that we pay on a weekly basis. It's reset weekly. And separately, we signed this swap transaction, and that goes from the top left Central Basin down to the swap counterparty, Citibank. So as I stated, we pay number 3 a fixed payment of 3.3%. Then they turn around and pay us a variable rate based on LIBOR. And that number 2 going up offsets, in theory, number 1. We've actually went to the Finance Committee and discussed that in the past. Some of the differences, usually those should balance, but recently number 1 was a little bit higher than number 2. So it has recently adjusted down so that 1 and 2 are very close again. And those two cancel each other in theory. Number 3 is all that's remaining. So why now? As we mentioned, there's a limited renewal that has been offered us for 6 months with their intent to terminate after the 6 months, and the rate that they proposed is about 25 basis points higher at 1.96. We currently pay 1.71. So a little background, I think you've seen this slide before. You know our rating agency, the Standard & Poor's rating agency rather, lowered our rating from AA to A- at the beginning of, or in the middle of 2017. You can see the letter of credit Costs correspondingly, or its inverse relationship, they have increased from about 0.75 to currently the 1.71. It will go to 1.96 in June. So just one more item I wanted to discuss. As part of the swap transaction the separate transaction we agreed to near the issuance time in 2008, because interest rates have lowered, that's made the swap less attractive for another party to take. So therefore, we need to pay approximately $1.45 million to exit the swap. This would be an additional amount that we'd have to pay to, in essence, refinance the 2008 Bs. It's gone down from $2 million, about the high, so it's a $500,000 decrease. However, that's also been a hindrance in the past for us not being able to refinance the 2008s. However, because of this urgency about the letter of credit, that is why this is now really as part of the consideration, is because of the letter of credit not being extended for more than that 6 months with the intent to terminate after that period. So again, why now? I just discussed that urgency. And staff feels that we really need to get on board with a potential solution to explore every solution as soon as possible. We do not want to wait till the last minute when that 6 month expires. That would be not prudent for staff to do. So again, some of the options on the left side are ones if we maintain the variable rate debt. The first one is to try to find another LOC provider. Number two is for us to find maybe an investor, a bank, someone to purchase that. Usually it's in the same kind of term as a LOC, maybe a 2 to 3 year window. But in essence, you're almost kicking the can down the road. If there's an issue now and things don't rebound, we'll still see this kind of financial instability in the future if we stay with the variable rate debt. If you look to the right, if we refinance and have a fixed rate debt, there's two options. One is a parity, meaning the bondholders will be kept the same as other bondholders. That's number three. Or number four, if they do a subordinated debt, they'd be kind of like second in line. Number three is a little bit better interest rate, but you have to have a decent market acceptance of that proposal. Number four, you have a subordinated debt that would be at a higher interest rate and that could potentially have the same market reaction. So moving to the next steps, staff actually issued an RFP earlier this week for investment banking and underwriting services, and that's due exactly a week from today, Thursday, March 22nd. That RFP is outstanding 10 days. Usually our RFP requires a 14-day issuance. But because of the urgency, we really want to get staff feels it's imprudent to get an investment banker or underwriter on board. The next day on Friday, in a week and 1 day from today, we'll review the proposals. There's going to be a committee formed by myself, the general manager, and our financial advisor to review those proposals. We'll then inform the board via email or FedEx of our recommendation with all the proposals. Then the next business day, in a week and a half from now, we'll have a board meeting that the board could then potentially decide on an underwriter, investment banker. So our recommendation is to direct staff to work with Field and Rollout to find opportunities to either extend the LOC, some of the options on the left side that we previously discussed, or just debt restructuring options, including the options on the right side of that four items that we had in the proposal, and to waive the 14-day requirement for the RFP for the investment banker underwriter services. So with that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
No.
I do have a question. You're asking that we waive the 14-day requirement for an RFP. That was one of the issues that was identified as being a problem by the auditors, and I'm not sure that you were aware, or that you were here during that time. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. And you're still recommending that we waive that?
So it's up to the board. If the board feels they want to take the 14-day, we can extend the term and potentially call a special board meeting in early April. However, just due to this urgency, some of the items that I've discussed previously, the letter of credit, just being informed of that limited extension. We have talked to Fieldman Roll-Up. They've been assisting us in kind of like the proposal process. And what they have said is we've issued the RFP specifically to 7 different entities. We feel confident that we'll have a decent response to that.
Oh, so you have issued an RFP?
Yes.
Okay. So you're just asking us to waive the 14-day, is that the submittal period?
Correct. The 14-day, we want to do it in 10 because of the urgency that we've stated. It's going to be on our website so other entities can see it.
Okay.
So we've had a broad process of selection and rather of submitting our RFP to different entities for them to make a proposal. So.
Oh, okay, excellent. So we're not bypassing the RFP.
The RFP. It's just shortening the window from 14 days to 10.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I have a question. Thanks for the presentation, by the way, but I noticed in this presentation we do note questions and input from Fieldman Roll-Up. We previously today just voted on a sole source contract with them. Do we have another existing contract with them, or how are we having these conversations with them?
So they've been our financial advisor in the past. And in essence, I've been asking just ever so brief questions. They've said that they would be willing to submit the proposal. There was not a cost to that. And the time that I'm asking on the phone is very brief, just as, kind of the questions part of that proposal. So they're not charging us for any of that.
That's a pro bono bit of work they're doing for us.
Correct.
And there's no, understanding that we're going to get this RFP in the future and do additional work, correct?
Absolutely. They have no guarantees of any work in the future. However, we did tell them we are putting on the agenda for today their financial advisor services, so.
Which you just approved, so they should be okay.
Yeah, but the work going forward before that was approved.
Yeah, that was at their risk.
That was done at pro bono, but yet we solicited that input, did we not?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yeah. And because they're the experts on our finances.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What's your motion?
I believe it is to direct staff to work with Fieldman Roll-Up to explore options regarding the 2008B LLC renewal and debt restructuring options, and also to waive the 14-day RFP posting requirement for investment banker underwriting services.
That motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call.
Director Chuckland?
Yes.
Director Gedney?
Abstain.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins?
Yes.
Director O'Scooley?
Yes.
Director Vasquez?
Yes?
President Apodaca?
Yes. Thank you. We're going to have a short recess, because the next one is quite lengthy. We all need to visit somebody. Discussion of Central Basin's water district's budget and finance.
Yes, so this agenda item, staff has worked very diligently with many different groups, and we're happy to make this presentation this morning. The agenda, we're going to discuss the purpose of this budget workshop, discuss some of the expenditures, some rates, is proposed the overall summary for revenue, budget summary, equity, and some stability items. So really the purpose of this budget workshop is to propose a lean budget. As we've discussed in other board meetings and finance committee items, we need a stable budget. There are two funding options. First is a fixed retail meter charge, and then the second option is the existing rate-based structure that we have. So moving to the expenditure summary, if you look at the first column, 2018, you can see the 2018 overall expense budget is $9.7 million. For 2019, in this iteration of the budget workshop, the 19 budget is proposed at $10.3 million. It's about a $600,000 increase. And just to highlight some of the first item I want to just highlight on this page is if you look at the administration and board services, that amount you can see goes from about $1 million in expense to about 1.775. The vast majority of that is the anticipated approximately $700,000 of election expenses for this next fall, the general election. So even though the overall expense budget is going up $600,000, we know $700,000, a little bit more than that amount, is directly related to the election expense. So there are other areas that have had reductions to get the budget to where it is. So let's discuss some of those increases. Like I said, previously, about a week or two ago, the election expense was anticipated to be $470,000, but with the resignation of one of the directors, it's now up to $700,000. Some of the other items in there, I want to skip to number 3, letter of credit. As we've discussed, there's a potential increase in cost of about $175,000 from the prior budget. If we skip down to number 7, recycled water costs, that's about $170,000. That's not necessarily related to volume, it's more related to the rate. We have a scheduled increase with our contract with the LA County Sand District. Number 8, if you look at some of the budget numbers from the prior year, we had budgeted a larger amount of salaries to be capitalized, and that is not the case in the 19 budget, and the net effect of the chief engineer and whatnot, the salary transfers decreased $200,000, so that it was a corresponding increase to expense. Some of the, number 9, some of the expenses or the expenditures in the capital budget, we moved about 110 over to the expense budget to put them in the proper classification, and the remaining items are some small increases unfavorable. If you look at the next side, here are some favorable decreases to the expense budget. First one is the salaries. Those are vacant positions and which aren't expected to be filled. That's $260,000. The San Gabriel Water Master fee, we're not going to be paying that, or we're budgeting for that amount in $88,000 in the fiscal 19 budget.
That's the, excuse me, the Water Master fee is the fee for that report that we get from the Water Master? Is that what that is? Is that what that money is for? Okay. So we've essentially given that authority to the Metropolitan Water District, right?
No,
I'm sorry, the Water Management District?
Yeah, we are trying to give it to them, but we have to get the court changed, and they file documents to have it changed in court.
Okay.
The proposed 19 budget has a reduction in staff of about $330,000, approximately 3 positions. Just 3 positions. For the budget in fiscal 19, we are also keeping some of the prior reductions that we made on the April 17th board meeting for approximately $574,000. Those roll forward to the successive budgets. And we had about a little over $1 million in reductions again in September of 17.
Regarding, okay, I'm sorry. I'll just make a note,
No, I can...
and I'll ask after. Go ahead.
Okay. So you can see on this next slide, here's a projection of expenses over the next 5 years. If you look at the fiscal 19 proposed, skip a column to the fiscal 21, skip another column to fiscal 23, you can see the large variation between in those 3 years. It is related to the administration and board services that really has to do with the election costs. So there's about $1.8 million in fiscal 19. It goes up to about $2.1 million in 2021 and goes up a little bit further in 2023. And that does reflect all the way down to the bottom line of 10.3 to 10.7 in 2021 and 11.2 in 2023. And you can see in 2020 and 2022, those middle columns, the expense budget is lower. So the election cost really has a significant impact on the district's expenses. So let's look at principal and capital. In the 18 budget overall is $2.8 million. This proposed budget, fiscal 19, is $2.4 million. You can see about a 50% decrease approximately in the capital budget. In some of the principal payments, you can see the scheduled, we have a higher scheduled debt service for principal. And the third item is the unfunded pension payments. That increases approximately $80,000, and that continues to increase about $80,000 until it gets to approximately $750,000 in a few years. So just beyond the... just know that $80,000 is going to continue to increase in successive budgets. So this next slide provides a overall summary of our expenditures, both our expenses and our principal and capital. There's a slight increase from $12.5 million to $12.75 million, and we've discussed the details of those previously. And with that, our general manager will discuss the proposed rates.
Yeah, our existing rates that we collect money from are potable water charge, a recycled water charge, a per CFS charge, and a parcel charge that stays fixed. And a replenishment water charge. We'll go in here and we'll show how each of those are affected in this budget. The first option is if we instituted a fixed meter charge. It would be about $3.50 to recover, put us in roughly a balanced budget position. The overall net rate is going up 3%. Our admin surcharge per hour rate master plan was 5% increase. Overall rate increase there on the potable rate would be 4%. The recycled water rate is to go up 5%. The Central Basin water meter service charge we have going up 35%. And option 2, we eliminate the fixed meter charge and we put the variation back on the potable rate. That means our surcharge goes up to 65%. The overall total potable rate is up 10%. And the recycle rate and the meter service charge stay the same at this time. This is based conservatively on recycled water projections we think are accurate. We've been overestimating that in the past. We think this is conservative, achievable. The potable water shows a significant decrease again to 16,500. We think that is a practical number. And we knew in this one is we've included 8,000 acre-feet of replenishment water based upon WOD is telling us that in their budget is the purchase of 8,000 acre-feet of replenishment water. And there's zero revenue coming from retail meters. In the second option, there's 315,000 roughly retail meters in the first option. A revenue summary, then, as you go through all the different charges we have a recycled water sales, we have our administrative surcharge, we have the replenishment surcharge, our standby charges, local resource program. This is the last year, and this budget will be the last year for the existing local resource program budgets. That will drop off next year and be replaced with a new, much, much lower one. Our investment earnings are projected to go up a bit because of the increasing interest rates and good work that Andrew and Dorette have done on this. I think it will continue to increase. We do have, we showed a new thing in here, NWD and conservation revenue, due to some good work on the part of Sandy and Tammy. And it looks like when Met adopts their conservation program, we'll be able to use $50,000 for our school program. So we budgeted that in there. And then the miscellaneous is a whole catch-all of different things. When you compare the overall revenue and expenses and capital principal, we're basically a balanced budget. We have $100,000 roughly into reserves. Given the accuracy of which you estimate, and it has a DCR calculation of 1.25. I mentioned before about the equity issue. For next year, it's not an issue because we'll be buying replenishment water. And so everybody's contributing. In the future, when we complete the WOD wheeling exchange agreement, it would solve the equity issue for the next 20 years of that agreement. And that revenue or any estimate of it is not included in this budget at this time. So the equity issue we have to worry about this year. Financial stability. And Andrew's impressed. Tight fiscal controls. We've got the message from the board with balanced budget, bond stabilization, the wheeling exchange agreement. We believe over the next year we get all this accomplished, we will have stabilized the district's financial condition going forward. It'll be a tough year financially, but I think when we get out of it, we'll be a stronger, more stable district. There are a lot of items currently under study. Sublease of the Rio Hondo property. WOD has expressed an interest. We have been talking with the city of Whittier about getting all the parties together. They just approved it last week, so hopefully we can either reduce the land we have out there, sublease it, or do whatever we have to do to minimize our financial exposure there. We're looking at implementation of voter-approved parcel charge. We gave a preliminary report to the committee on that, and hopefully in the next month or so we'll have a formal report on what the total costs are scheduled and what the next step would be so the board can make a decision. One of the things, we haven't mentioned it in this presentation on finances because we're concentrating on the renewal of the letter of credit and that, but there's an option to pay the pension debt with taxable bonds, which could save us money, and again, we'll look at that over the next year. We are looking at, for the long-term stability of the school program, getting private companies or grants for sponsorship for that education program. We've been talking to folks with expertise in that area. I mentioned the new LRP we have coming in, and that will generate about $50,000 to $60,000 starting off. We mentioned the wheeling water. Separate from the transfer of water, there's some I guess two ways to talk about our relationship with WRD. One is going to be to wheel some water for them, and the second is to lease some of our recycled water capacity. And both of those things were in preliminary talk stages. We're going to bring a report to the board within about 6 weeks. We looked at the sale of the office building. We just talked about refinancing a variable rate bond. One of the new things that just popped up, the health insurance provider. We have been with Aqua JPIA for a long time, And a very, very similar program is available through PERS. Very same thing, has a little bit higher deductible at the beginning for the employees, about $300 a year. But as long as we have an HRA to cover that, the employees shouldn't be impacted. So we're going to be looking at that further and taking that through the committees to the board. It would save, I believe the latest count was $110,000 a year. So those are just some of the items currently under study. Because of that, I'm proposing we'll continue to keep the board informed in April through the Finance Committee and any results of any of these studies, and continue working with the retail agencies. We will take the budget and raise to the board in May now, which is our normal month to do it. And that'll give us additional time to flesh some of these things out. With regard to the purveyor's letter that came out, we're actually not that far apart, other than item 1.
Can I go back to your structure regarding 2018 and 2019, then we can talk about it?
Okay. How far back do you want to go?
To the comparisons in the budget, what you're proposing and what 2018 looked like and what 2019
Okay. On the cost side, I presume. Yeah. The overall cost, or just the...
I think you need to keep going back.
Yeah. The next one here should have this one here?
Yes.
Okay.
So how does that compare to what the purveyors who spend a lot of time working very diligently with you and looking at all of the numbers in specificity, they wanted a reduction in the budget, which I would have thought, I understand your numbers, but I would have thought they would have seen the budget go from 9.7 million to like maybe 8.7 million rather than 10.3 million.
Well, in order to do that, I would have had to reduce $700,000 in additional for the election, which would then come back. We explained the reasons for the changes. Election expenses are $700,000 next year, which we don't have this year. The letter of credit is $175,000 increase that we didn't have the prior year that we're working on.
I think we were talking about $1.3 million in reduction, and they're number one. And the other things that are not necessarily in here. I don't think they can question the cost of an election, and I don't think they can question the cost of letter of credit. I don't think they touched on that, Kevin.
Yeah, but again, they're saying the only difference they're saying is reduce your staff by 1.3 million. It was 1.1 million last I saw. I don't know if that 1.3 is a typo or is it changed. It used to be our total cost for salary and benefits is 3.3 million. So it used to be 1.1 million. So I don't know what but saying it's 1.1, 1.3 begs the question. We're looking at a $300,000 reduction, $330,000 reduction in staff and benefits, not a $1.3 million reduction.
Yeah, that's a huge divide there, a space in terms of the discussions you both had. And ongoing, that's going to continue to cost. I think that some of the things that you looked at is, I do think that we should be trying to fund the unfunded pension. I think that is important. But I don't feel we're getting our hands on our costs going forward. And we have breathing room now with this new information from WID that they will be buying water from us. But we should still be looking at our costs, those costs that we can take care of ourselves. And I see some reductions here, but I don't see that you've taken into consideration the work they did in looking at all of your numbers.
I actually think I have, Director. I think they did not give me, and rightly so, and I appreciate it, they did not give me specific recommendations, cut this, do that, do that. They said cut your salaries and benefits by 1.3 million. I don't believe that's the appropriate thing to do. What I am trying to do is cut costs. And I can't propose, for example, to eliminate, say we had a car washing program, I can't propose to eliminate the car washing program if it's still on the board's agenda to do. I've done that. I put up a bunch of proposed reductions in January. The board selected which ones they wanted to do. My budget is responsive to what the board direction they gave me January 12th. So I can't go back and drop things out and say we're not going to do this, this, and this at this time. I do think that the budget we have in here, either way, and we'll continue to work at it, will be a tight but acceptable budget to keep the district doing what it's doing and keep it moving forward. It'll be painful. I mean, we're going to be less staff, and we'll be down to 19 people. We were 25 a year ago. So I think we are downsizing. It just takes time to do it. Some of the suggestions was outsource and stuff like that. We will look at things like that as we go along. You can't do them in the time frame that, in a fairly short period we have here. But we'll continue to work at this and continue to work on both the suggestions they have and other things that we're working on to increase revenue as we go along. This is, unfortunately, it's a painful process that will go on probably for the next year as we go through some of these things.
I have not seen anything put in front of the board where it's stated this program costs exactly this amount of money, approximately this amount of money, and takes this many staffing members to do. I've seen some approximate numbers put in front of the board for consideration. I've not seen anything put in front of the board that, in an effort to lower costs, in an effort to try to get a handle on our costs going forward, we should look at trying to reduce another $1 million. And in doing that, I, the expert, or the general manager, suggest that we reduce these particular programs, these areas. If we do that, we will reduce this amount of money. It seems like it's all approximate, it's a little bit nebulous, and even in the January 12th meeting that I did not attend, I looked at that and I couldn't tell exactly what we were going to say and how we were going to go about doing that. So I think that the board didn't quite well. I wasn't there, but if I had been there, I would have asked for more information, and I would have asked, how does this number work? What does it take to do this kind of program and staffing? I believe most of the purveyors and everyone on the ad hoc committee have stated that they want reductions, program reductions. They do not want to pay for those. They do not want the fixed meter charge. Is the fixed meter charge still on the table here?
Interesting question. Okay, I have told the director, I'll be blunt about it, I've told the purveyors they wanted to have a separate ad hoc meeting with the directors. I recommended against that. I said I will take it off the table and I'll send you another revised thing out, which I did last Friday.
You would take
what I would take the fixed charge off the table and send them another revised charge, which is the option here. They chose to have a meeting with the directors. I chose to keep my word and put it back on. It's up to the board whether you decide on the fixed charge or not. It says there's any of this stuff. What I gave you today, and we don't have to decide today, we're still working on it. I gave you two options. One is with a fixed charge, one is rate-based.
Director Ray, I have a comment on that. Kevin, I want to fully agree with you and your perspective and your statement. We still have a lot to do to work on this. And as was said in January, I said this myself, we all have a vision for this district, and it may not be the same vision, but to see this through, it could be a very different looking district. And so what I would ask is, we have the two options that you state you have identified, which both indicate two different types of increases. And I don't think you have had time, because this is the first I've seen the statement from the purveyors, and again, I compliment them for the time they put into this. Would it be possible that by the next board meeting we have an option 3 which inculcates their perspectives, their recommendations, which has no increase in either area, with the reductions that they have identified, whatever those might be, but there's a dollar value now, $1.3 million in reductions. And again, we all agree that's very painful and very hard to look at, but I think it would be fair to the board to identify that third option so we have something to look at. We have two different increases and now several meetings with the purveyors. And I don't want to ask them to do more work, but if you guys need to meet again to do more work and you want some of the board members there, then we will agree to do that. But I'd like to see an option 3, which identifies the no increases, and the cuts and savings that they have identified based upon the many meetings they had and came up with in this last letter. So that would be a third option from my perspective.
To do that, and that's fine, I'll do whatever the board wants in terms of, to do that, you have to understand that you have to eliminate whole programs. That the board has not done that. So I can tee up options for the board to do it. And, how do I do? I go back to my fictional car washing program. The board action, they've approved funding for that. They did not take it off the table in January. I can go back and put it back on the table and say, we're going to eliminate that program. And I can do that with a bunch of others. How do we get down to this? But I don't want you to think that that's reality of a functioning district achieving what we're supposed to do. The correct way to right size and change what we're doing is do what we did when I first started here. Do a strategic plan, get everybody's input, come up with your goals and objectives and and go through and do that in a way that at the end of the process, you've agreed on what you're going to do and what you're not going to do as a whole, not just by hacking away and not knowing what you're doing when you get to the end.
We received another letter from the city of Huntington Park that's opposing the fixed meter charge. Two things. One, I'd like to hear from the players if they're willing to say, are you willing to meet again, based on what Director Gaffney said? And two, the strategic plan that you folks went through, in my opinion, did not address the issue of revenue falling. You guys completely missed that, and that was probably the prime thing. We want to do all these things. We want to be all this. Now, can we afford to do that? That was missed in the plan. Now you want to have another strategic plan?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly the right point. You're totally correct. It was missed. We overestimated the revenue. We didn't see the dramatic decline in potable sales. Okay, so now what your normal way to do it is you actually do have it. And it's board involved, and it involves the retail agencies and the employees, any of the, what you call these stakeholders and so on. You do that strategic. We have the process we can get through next year because we have artificially propped up still next year. We have $560,000 in replenishment water, and we still have LRP money. There's another decline after that. That money goes away. So we have time to do it the right way, but go back and doing a strategic vision, coming up with what we think the district should look like in the future, and coming up with a plan to get there. Instead of letting the tail wag the dog and doing short-term finances, right, with a strategic vision for the district. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. We did miss it 3 years ago, and I think now's the right time to redo it. So we'll come up with a budget. The board will make a decision either on the budget we have here is the budget I've been asked to prepare, if that's the board's pleasure, that incorporates the drastic cuts. But I would recommend that you use the next year to create a vision of the district and what it is going forward and do it the carefully thought out way. When you do this under pressure of financial cutting with things like no rate increase. We went from, in the master plan we had 5% rate increase, now no rate increase is required. And I think there's a negotiation in there to be had. I think if we come in with, per our master plan that we did 2 years of another 5% rate increase, I don't think we'd be having these discussions. But bottom line is we can do it any way you want, but I really would prefer that you do it in a careful, thought-out way, not under the financial pressures. And one of the suggestions they made is, and I'll paraphrase it a bit, is throw the financial metrics out the window. Don't worry about your DCR. Use your reserves to get through the next year if you have to. Which, now that we know that we're going to have 6 months on the letter of credit and it's gone, that is an option for next year too. We could budget to take more out of reserves and get through. That way you haven't made decisions before you have gone through the right process.
So let me just add one thing. So then it sounds to me, Kevin, again, if the purveyors are willing to do this, that's up to them. But it sounds to me what you're describing is then possibly an option 4 where you do draw down reserves, as opposed to some other kind of action that we do here. So maybe, and again, I'll leave this in your guys' hands. Maybe we have a proposal for an option 3 where we have no increases, a proposal for an option 4 so that the board can understand and vet those issues of either a partial drawdown or additional staff reductions or salary reductions or something without an increase. And so, what I'm asking for, what I see as one additional thing, given the fact we've got till May and we're going to be really hustling to get to this point in time, is that we come up with some additional options so that the board has choices. And these are hard choices.
Yeah.
But it sounds to me like you've got some additional factors that you can come up with to identify additional options options as a way forward, that would not include rate increases.
Yeah, and that's...
Well, my comment would be that as you increase rates, you're going to push those folks that use our services away. That's what MWD's done. And it's a fact that people are not buying imported water if they can do that. If they can turn to pumping from the ground and using their water rights and not purchase imported water that's so expensive, that's what they're going to do. And that's what they've been doing. As we raise our rates substantially, if they can get off of our system, that's what they're going to do. We're going to continue to push them away from us. They're not for the fixed meter charge. They're looking at ways that it does not need to be implemented. I think, again, when the board considered on January 12th those 8 items that they punted on, I think they wanted to see those in relationship to all these other things. And I think now if you present everything in that picture and show that this 2019 budget can be further reduced with some either full acceptance of those aid or partial acceptance of those aid, and we look at that, plus what that might do is it means we don't have to do the fixed meter charge, which is angered all of the water purveyors. Most of them, I heard there's one that hasn't angered about it.
That's only because of one connection I promised to take them to lunch once a year.
So they've angered all of our customers based on this, and the board hasn't even taken action on this yet. So this budget going forward, even though it's, according to you, it's good, we've cut everything out, it needs to be cut even further because of the issue that's coming up. And we just don't know where our revenue streams are going to be. And we need breathing room. We need at least 2 years to figure out, and we do have it with WD, but we need to cut as much as we can without cutting our nose off. At the same time, not implement rates that we may not need to do because we need more time to figure out where we're at, but we do need to look at expenses, Kevin, more than we're looking at now.
I agree with you in principle on a general approach. I don't necessarily agree with you. Expenses haven't been cut. If you go through and look through a line item by line item, detail by detail, you may get a different opinion of how we spend our money, what we've cut out over the last 2 years of cuts. Because when we go through...
And even the past 5.
Yeah, that's true. When Director Vasquez got here, this district had, 10 consultants and embedded employees.
Federal lobbyists, state lobbyists.
Yeah, we have none of that now. So we've got fairly bare-bones districts. It's a question of understanding what we do.
Kevin, you cut all that, but you didn't need any of that in the first place. So yes, it was good, but it was a waste at the time. And the purveyors at the time spoke about that, but we had no voice then. We cut good things back then, but it was wasteful. Now we're getting down to we've got to cut more. It's not wasteful necessarily, but we're not utilizing it. Now you're telling us that you're providing all these programs, and all the purveyors are using this program, and it was an equitable situation here that we're supposed to pay for, and we're saying, you know what? Okay, tell us what that program is going to cost, and we'll tell you whether or not we want to pay for it. We've cut all the waste out, but now we've got to go further because we cannot pay for it, Kevin.
And Director, like I said, we will get there. I think the thing to remember is that if we do it carefully, deliberately, and that means taking time. It may take a year to right-size more than a couple of months. We'll come to a much better, stable solution that we all want. Right now, one of the most important things that happened is this letter of credit being, for not renewing it. That actually may be a good thing. It may end up costing us some money in the long run, maybe some money out of reserves when we refinance. But in the short term, it takes away that financial metric that was putting pressure on to meet the DCR. And then we can use reserves for a year when we go through a process of, if we need to really look at whether we need to eliminate. But there's questions, people question conservation, which has been actually millions of dollars have gone into the community through Metropolitan and grants that we've done for conservation, and I don't think that people quite understand it. But we have metrics and maps that show that in that. But there are programs, the board decides which programs we do. you're totally correct, Director Gann, maybe Director Weber wasn't clear enough of which ones are things. There are certain core things we have to do. We have to be represented and met. We have a recycled water system. We have a contracts with people. We have to deliver water. Those are core things that we have to do. Many of the other things, it's a board decision. They're good things to have, but I do think that we bought at least 6 weeks of time. We can further define where we are financially in terms of the bond situation and the financial rating agencies. We can further define where we are in terms of some of the other cost-cutting or revenue enhancement measures that we're looking at. And we'll incorporate all those in. We'll have another, and again, board wants to have another workshop. We can do that in early April, I guess would be the best way. But and again, our offices have always been open to the retail agencies since I've got here. I know you and I have argued about the frequency of the Purveyor workshops. I'm more than willing to go quarterly now. But,
or eliminate it, as one director suggested, right?
No, it's too nice of people. I'd like to see the occasionally, just not as often.
I think they're important.
Well, just one additional comment, since this is a workshop. I'd like to hear from a couple of the purveyors, if I could, because we've beat pretty hard on this law and tried to move it, and I'd like to kind of get perspectives from the purveyors, if perhaps they have a few folks want to...
have a concern to General Manager Mr. Hunt that why he chose to put this meter charge back on the table, as he stated, because we chose to meet with a couple of directors. I don't understand that. I thought we were all here working together. Is it him, you, or is everybody divided here? And so we met with you folks. Now it's back on the table. If he found a way to take it off the table in the first place, why is it back now? Is that in retaliation to us? That's one of my main concerns.
No, and that's actually exactly what I said. I sent you a letter on Friday. Instead of a response, no call to me or anything, you're meeting with my directors without saying anything. And I told you at the time, I will send you a response without it on it. You never respond.
Are you meeting with your directors or our directors? They represent us. You work for them.
I do, absolutely.
I'm just really bothered by that.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. I can tell you from my standpoint, Director Hawkins and I and Director Chacon were supposed to meet with them on Monday, and it was just Director Hawkins and I met with the ad hoc committee, and they basically told us what they'd been telling Kevin. I think there was a concern that the message wouldn't get to us, and that's why. And that's why they're here today. And from our perspective, they are very concerned and have been very concerned. What's the letter writing up to now? 12, 13? How many letters have we received now?
Oh, I don't know. We've got one from Central Basin Water Association, which covers almost everybody, right?
Yeah, but
I would say it's honest to say that we have 39 proposals.
Okay. So we have every one of our customers is saying no, and we're still considering it. The board's never voted on it, and the purveyors have taken a great deal of time to sit down and meet with you and go through your numbers. They're not winging it. They're going through the numbers that they've gotten to, and they've given you suggestions. And I think the response back has been, well, maybe no, can't do it without the board. The board doesn't know all this, I don't think, and I think that the board hadn't heard this letter from the purveyors, how they feel. I don't know if the entire board knows that most, if not all, of the purveyors are against the fixed meter charge. Does the board know that? Does all the board members know that? Do they know that the purveyors feel there's another way of getting by without the fixed meter charge? I mean, that's a question that I would ask the board and try to get an answer back from. They're trying to understand our business, and they're looking at it from professionals. There were cities, there were municipalities, and we understand this is hard, and that's why we said, you've got to do it because you're the general manager, but we feel the cuts can be there. After looking at everything, we feel the cuts can be there. But I think it's disingenuous to say if you go before the board, then I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. We're either going to do it because it needs to be done, or we're not going to do it because we don't have to do it. That should be the answer.
Good point.
thank the two directors that met with us the other day. We thought we had a great, productive meeting, and thank you so much for your concern. You know, I've kind of been on both sides of this table before, so I can understand what Mr. Hunt's going through. I've been through the same thing. And, you know, one of the things that we said was, you know, if we don't do this, some bad things are going to happen. And the next thing you know, the council's directed me to go define those bad things. I would like to see the 4 options. I'd like to see that. I think that my fellow purveyors would like to see those. Here's one thing we have to realize is that this district is not going to be the way it was in the past. The whole area has developed to where there's a utilization of groundwater recharge to basin. Technology has got to a point where you can better do that. You can capture that. There's other projects on the board. And basically, the more you raise the charges, the less I'm going to go back and I try to look after, you know, I'm Golden State Water and, you know, rates, people talk about that. But I am concerned about that. I try to be very cognizant of the fact that when things affect those rates, and anytime you have a rate increase and we don't really actually receive anything additional for it, it does affect my ratepayers. And as we all are, we're in an economically depressed area. So I'd like to see those 4 options. I'd like to see how would it be, you know, and what does it look like? I do like the idea, though, you know, if you can solve the problem right now, temporarily, if you have to take out reserves or whatever, and then take a look and say, what is this district going to look like? We don't want to come back and do this every single year. We don't want to put the general manager through that. We don't want to put the board through that. So let's just go ahead and look at the 4th option that Director Gandy had recommended, and let's just see what that looks. And I think we all need to feel a little bit of pain and going forward. And, you know, we can look in the eyes of our constituency and we can say, you know, we did everything that we possibly could to try to save jobs or keep rates down or whatever it was we did. So my recommendation to the board, and you know, if we get any nods from the purveyors, was let's go back and let's look at those 4 options and let's see what it would be and can we all live with that? Can we live with it? That's all I have.
Good morning. Frank Beach, City of Santa Fe Springs. I echo everything that's been said, and I would like to see 4 options. One thing I would like to just bring in from the board is, you know, water rates have gone sky high, and it's a real issue for cities, especially Santa Fe Springs. And just on an acute note, the reclaimed water rates. You know, Santa Fe Springs is one of the more progressive cities that utilizes about 1,000 acre-feet reclaimed water a year. We've got 120, 130 meters, and we really, I don't force people to take reclaimed water, but I lean on them, nudge them, and, you know, new developments, and we still have a lot of developments in Springs where they hook up to reclaimed water. But when you start doing a cost-benefit analysis with today's numbers and increases, suddenly that reclaimed water does not look as good versus potable. You look at the capital outlay to get your reclaimed water to the site, and people are starting to say, why? Why do I need to do this? Potable's here. It's going to take me 20 years to recover this. You know, and the argument for there, I mean, there is no argument for that. So you start losing customers that way. I just want to point that out. You know, we've been very aggressive with reclaimed water in Santa Fe Springs, and you know, a lot of times it just doesn't pan out anymore because the rates are getting you know, so high. I won't even comment on the other rates because those are just astronomical. Any increase that is levied on the purveyors, you know, cost Santa Fe Springs, pass-through costs. Just I'm gonna tell you with some of the numbers that Kevin put out last Friday, it's $467,000. That's $500,000 to Santa Fe Springs, small little city. And I could go on to how the employees have been hit. I got 50% staff. I could stand up here and tell you all that, but you know, we've all gone through it, and it's very very scary when you look at the water rates and where water's going. And I really like the idea of 4 different options, because that would kind of give you an idea, and us, an idea of what exactly we're going to be looking at in the future, so we can protect the customers, protect water rates, keep looking at reclaimed water as another source to where it's not competing with potable water now for high rates. It should be much lower to where it's a no-brainer for people, but it's starting to escalate to the point where it's not. And like I say, the cost-benefit analysis is not there in many, many cases. So, anyway, thank you.
I wanted to say also appreciate the board giving us the opportunity to look at those things, and also Kevin and his time with us working on that. And I just want to echo what Bridge said. I think there are other options than just a meter charge and a rate increase. I think there are some more cost reductions that could be made, and I think the rest of the ODHOT committee would agree with that, and there's maybe even a possible 4th option. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Good morning, honorable members. Please understand that the ad hoc committee met, 4 or 5 times, 12 to 15 members, spending 3-4 hours sometimes, and these are about 150 to 200 hours that we discussed. Although Gina read out our statement, this single page, but please understand that we have spent 150 to 200 hours on the statement, and we feel that it is necessary, not an option, but we think it's necessary. And by being necessary, that by making these cuts, that we could go back to our cities and saying that Central Basin has done whatever is necessary. And that's what we need to do for our cities, and I hope you understand that. That's what we're trying to do. And it's a one-page statement, but a lot of hours are spent on that statement, please. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make a comment. I am very concerned about these rate increases and the impact that it's going to have on our purveyor community. And, I want to thank the purveyors for taking the time from their schedules to come and be a part of the committee to give your input and your suggestions on what we need to do or what we should do here at Central Basin to address some of the fiscal challenges that we have before us. I'm also very concerned about the potential hits that the residents, not just the cities, but the actual people that pay the bills to your communities, and the impact on their pocketbook. I talk to folks all the time. I represent probably one of the most, or some of the most financially strapped communities in the entire Central Basin District. And so whenever water rate increases are proposed, I pay very close attention. And I know that those water rate increases that we propose at Central Basin have to be justifiable. But I'm also concerned about the water rate increases that you all impose in your respective agencies upon the ratepayers, because it's those two combined rate increases that they have to pay for, not the city, not the private water company, but the actual citizen that has to pay the bill. So in that spirit, I have requested an analysis of what those rate increases have been to our average citizen in our district. And I would really like to see what that looks like through a board presentation, a public presentation. I know that you all have prepared prepared that information for me. I don't know if it was given to anyone else, but I would like to see what those impacts have been over the past 5 years to our residents, not just the Central Basin rate increases, but also those rate increases that have been done by the respective agencies that purchase water from us. I want to see the bigger picture so that I can make a well-informed decision. I know that the Central Basin for 4 years, I think it was 3 or 4 years, we did not we did not make any rate increases at the board level, and it greatly impacted our operations, as you can see. But at the same time, I do understand that those purveyors did make their own rate increases in their agencies while we were not doing that. So I would like to make a request that we get a bigger picture of what those increases have been within those agencies as we make this decision. Also, we are making suggestions about further cuts to the services that the Central Basin offers, and I think it does beg for a bigger discussion about who we are and what we do. So in hearing our general manager's suggestion about revisiting our strategic plan, I think that's very important for us to revisit and have a full discussion with this board about what it is, the services that we want to offer as an agency, and what we feel are services that may not be needed. So I support, having those broader discussions as we go through this process.
I just want to pass on to the board, our chief financial officer just informed me that we have to be very careful for option 4, and that we have conditions on other bonds other than our variable rate ones that require that we remain a 1.15 debt coverage ratio, which will restrict how much we can take out of reserves. So option 4 I'll have to get a little creative with, but I'll come up with something for it.
Kevin, were you going to bring, I'm trying to understand what Director Vasquez is asking for. I'm not quite sure, but were you going to bring something back to the board regarding her request?
That's what the director just requested. So at the next workshop, I'll bring something up. She had requested to know what the rate increases were from all the agencies over the list.
One of the things I want to see in that report also is whether or not this district considered increasing rates each of those 4 or 5 years she's talking about. But I believe that they did. I'm not asking if you took action, but I want to know if they discussed the fact of whether or not they wanted to do it and chose not to do it. That's what I'm looking for.
I'll have to ask Maggie to research that before my time.
That's important that be included in that workshop, sir.
Kevin, and I'd make one additional observation, and I don't know if we want to bring this back, but I heard what the purveyor said today, and I have heard over the length of my career many times where purveyors have had to go into some kind of a cash conservation program. And I've observed that in both private agencies, in public agencies, in mutuals, and other wholesales. And so if we're going to consider taking a look at other increases over a period of time, I also know that one of the board members, who's not here right now, has commented on the fact that at his agency where he works, they've had to go through some pretty strict measures to save cash. And so if we're going to consider taking a look at increases and what that paid for, I heard from the purveyors today, we as a collective group of purveyors have gone through many situations, many occasions where we gave up working, full hours out of our pay period. We had pay cutbacks, whatever. So I think if we're going to go down that road and start looking at those things, we need the whole picture. And I wouldn't ask purveyors to put into that kind of a picture, but you heard that as well today, that if we're going to look at increases, what is involved with the pay increase or a rate increase increase to our customers, you need to give the whole picture, because many purveyors over the history of the purveyors for this district have gone through periods of time where they really had to tighten their belt and do some uncomfortable things. So I think we need a full picture. If we're going to go and look at one side, we need to look at the other side. I'm not asking for this. I don't think it's appropriate for this board to ask for that. But I want that to be identified, that if we're going to go down that pathway, we need to tell the whole picture.
And Director, you're totally correct, but that's a short-term solution. A year, maybe two, you can do that, otherwise you lose your people, etc. But again, that's certainly part of the table, as is everything else that's been discussed. So right now, goal is to come back sometime early April, give us time to get some of this done with two options. One would be this diagram with an option that includes the cost come out to meet what the purveyors have requested, where we would cut. And of course, you understand that means that if we're going to do $1 million cut in people, that's 10 people, and this becomes a non-functioning district. But I will put that out there for you if that's what you like. I'm trying to make sure we get this right. We're proposing a cut of 3 people that's embedded in our calculations here. And now I'll have to sit down and talk with them. Do I get credit for that, or is it in addition to what we've proposed? Or is it just enough to take the connection fee off the table? I mean, we're going through this, and we have cut a number of things, and we're proposing to cut additional. And yet there are things outside of our control, like the election, like the LOC costs and stuff, like the pension costs that are increasing on the other side. So we're talking here about people's livelihood and careers and stuff like that, and I want to make sure that we're doing this appropriately. But I'll bring it back. You'll have that option. You'll have the fourth option, which would be a one with no... It'll be a balanced one. Will give us time to do the... And actually, pardon my rambling, actually we have that in there. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 sources of revenue that are in there that won't be there in 2020. One is the replenishment sale, 560. The other is the LRP money of 600 and some odd. So that's over $1 million right there. So actually, next year is our transition year with this budget.
That's kind of the issue that I'm getting at, is even whatever cuts we do, long term, I know you're saying, well, we generate this new revenue, but long term we have these potential additional costs that we need to flag. And I think the purveyors did the best they could, but I think we need to bring back in to try to pick up some of those costs. Maybe it's not $1.3 million and stuff, but maybe it's a reduction of approximately $1 million. I'm not trying to speak for them, but if you're here and they're here, maybe it's getting closer to somewhere in between. And maybe it comes back to those 8 items again. How can the board consider those 8 items again and maybe say, okay, you know what, I didn't understand that. Maybe I would go for cutting this and cutting that, giving this a haircut, giving that a haircut, maybe scalp this, take it out. And what would that do? How would that affect the overall structure of this agency? Because that doesn't provide it. And all that's got to be given at the same time, I think, Kevin. And that's just showing good faith with our customers.
No, I understand.
That's just showing good faith.
As you know, I've been preaching since the day I got here that there are customers, and while the elected officials are responsible to the voters, I, as a manager, really work with them because that's where the revenue comes from. So I understood that from day one. So is that the plan? We'll come back and give you another month. We'll come back in early April with another workshop on this, or can we put it off to probably mid-April? Would be better, a month from now. We'll have more defined by then. And the goal is still we have to have a budget that meets all of our legal restrictions by May. So any other questions from the directors? Any other comments from the purveyors?
So, Mr. Chair, so are we talking mid-April? Would mid-April, about this time in April, be enough time for you to put your numbers together? Combining their numbers with your numbers?
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff, will we have a better feel from the financial people?
But you've already done a lot of work. They've done all
The cost part, it's the financial part. When I talk about, I'm talking pure financial with the bonds and that's more. For example, when we refinance the bonds, will our costs go up? Can we do interest only for a period of time to lower them significantly to buy time? Those are things that we'll get together with our financial team. We'll have the underwriter on board and with our bond counsel and them and work through the scenarios. And we'll work through the finance committee to keep them abreast. But there are some options in there that make a significant difference.
So mid-April?
Yeah, I think that's a motion. A little more. Yeah, we'll know a lot more. And then again, the goal is we have to have the final answer to put through the process and may go through the finance committee and then to the board with the rates.
So mid-April?
Yeah, mid-April. So, we'll work. Okay.
General Counsel's report.
No report today, Mr. President.
General Manager report on district activities. Director's comments, anybody? Anything with the spokesperson? Anything?
Well, I don't necessarily want to be the spokesperson, but I would like to thank the purveyors for all the work they've done, and we will listen to you, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work that's being done, but this is a dire issue, and we want to try to get a handle on it so we don't have to keep doing this every year. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go to Mr. Hawkins.
I just want to thank everybody here. Thank you for coming and making your concerns known to us. And please keep coming. Let us know how you feel, so that way you can help us to make the right decisions.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I would like to make a request to the staff to provide us with copies. I know sometimes you give us copies of your presentations beforehand in other meetings, but if you would be kind enough to provide those for us at the meeting also, so that, because I usually take notes on them, so I don't have to shuffle around and then that was one. And then the other question was regarding the water master. I'd also like to get, I know that we've given that responsibility to the water replenishment district now, right?
We're trying to, yes.
We're trying to, okay. So I would like to get a presentation about who the water master is, what their role is, and who they are and what their role is here with the Central Basin, because I know we're trying to give it over to them. And there was a concern by someone on the board about that, and whenever there's a concern, I always like to ask, why we would be concerned about that, and so I'd like to know.
Let's revisit. The board has voted on it already, authorizing us to do it, but we'll be revisiting. Tamir Kevin can have that.
Yeah, just kind of a full report about what that is and what their role is with the Central Basin, why we need to take legal steps to give that function to someone else.
With all due respect, Director Vasquez, there's going to be a workshop. WD's putting on a workshop on the role of water master, April something, all different. Is that different?
That's the Central Basin water.
So were you talking about the main San Diego Basin and the protection? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought
he's on it tonight.
Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, meeting's adjourned.